أوكي، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so now we're on إياك نعبد. Okay, so he says إياك نصب بوقوع نعبد عليه. Right, i.e. it is the مفعول به of نعبد. So it's في محل نصب. We don't call it منصوب because it's not معرب. وقرأ الفضل ابن عيسى الرقاشي إياك، فتح الهمزة. وقرأ عمرو بن فائد إياك، إياك مخففا. Right? Who's in the who's in the which class? The Jamhara class. We saw the word إياك or إياه.
How was there, Sheikh?
Okay, so what does إياه mean?
It's rays of the sun.
Rays of the sun, yep. Yeah, right. So إياك, the rays of your sun, right? إياك, the rays of your sun. We worship the rays of your sun, أعوذ بالله, right? So, but anyway, he's not saying that as from that point of view. He's just pronouncing it in a different way. إياك إياك مخففا. والاسم من إياك عند الخليل وسيبويه إيا، والكاف موضع خفض. So now they're trying to analyze what's going on here. When you say na'buduka and then you take off the kaf and put it on iya, what's going on? Are these two words? Are they one word? If they are two words, what is the relationship between iya and the kaf? So he's saying Sibawayh and Khalil, they are saying that it's idafa, right? The iya of you we worship, right? So it's a relationship of idafa, okay? He says والكاف موضع الخفض مضاف إليه, okay? And he says وعند الكوفيين إياك اسم بكمالها. It's not two words, it's one word, okay? وزعم الخليل زعم الخليل رحمه الله أنه اسم مضمر, that it is a pronoun. قال أبو العباس هذا خطأ لا يضاف المضمر, right? So this is if right. So you don't. So he says if it's a mudmar, if it's a pronoun, it's not going to become mudaf. Why? Why could you never do idafa of a pronoun? Let's try and say in English. Let's try and say do an of construction where the first word is a pronoun and then it says of and then it says something else. Does that exist in English? I of America.
No,
You of the house. That doesn't make any sense. So what's the issue with the damir or the pronoun? Is it's too definite already. You can't make it more definite because it's extremely definite, right? So that's not something you can do idafa of. Just like it's like I'm giving you exact coordinates and I say where. I'm like, well, what do you want me to say? These are the exact coordinates. Like I can't make it more accurate. I can't define it even more anymore, right? So the damir لا يضاف. Okay, الضمير لا يضاف. So notice what our scholars are doing. They are playing around with words. They're playing around with the values of the words, right? And the characteristics of words. And essentially they're playing around with linguistics and philosophy. That's what's happening. So if you read Al-Kitab by Sibawayh, it is a book on grammar, morphology, linguistics, phonetics, phonology, and ultimately philosophy. Like you can't separate the two, right? You can't separate philosophy from language. And so, in order for that book to exist, there has to have been a lot of material before him. Just like Imam Shafi, here's Kitab al right? In order for Imam Shafi to write Kitab al there has to precede Imam Shafi a lot of thinking and discussions, right? It doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? Similarly, Aristotle and Plato, they don't just come out of nowhere. Right? Just super intelligent people with really complex ideas from nowhere. It doesn't happen like that. There's a century, two, three, four of people thinking and discussing things, right? So it's indicative, right? So if you look at the date, right, when does Sibawayh pass away, right? 180 or something. Sibawayh. Yeah. So and then here, one of my teachers, he said, you know, the dates, if you look on Wikipedia, it says 148 to 180. So he's 32 years old. He said that is impossible that a 32-year-old can write a book like Kitab Sibawayh. Impossible. So it's probably way older than that. So there's two things that he's mentioning. Well, the first point I'm trying to say is by the year 180, there has to be approximately 100 years of people thinking on a very, very deep level, or let's say 50 years at least. Okay, there's a whole school of thought and discussions and debates going around. Some of those things we see, and some of them things we don't see, like Khalil coming in, right? Yunus, Akhfash. So we see there's people around him, just like with Plato and Aristotle, we see Socrates, right? There's already discussions happening, thoughts happening, right? But those people themselves, they didn't create themselves. You don't just come out of nowhere. So he's probably the product of the third or fourth generation of these kind of thoughts and these kind of discussions, right? But nobody comes along and just like, oh, I'm an imam. It doesn't work like that. So there has to be time before, there has to be a process, there has to be schools of thought and discussions that result in that person, A, and then B, that person cannot be 32 years old, because at 32 years old, people don't reach that kind of level of maturity in thought. It doesn't happen, right? Normally. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay, خير. So it says مخففا It says والكاف موضع الخفض وعن كوف So it says وهذا خطأ قال أبو العباس. I'm not sure who this is. I think this is ثعلب. It says هذا خطأ لا يضاف المضمر ولكنه مبهم مثل كل. Right, so كل, he's trying to say it's like كل, which is kind of like vague. So there's these three types of words. There's this term mubham and there's a term mudmar. Mubham is used for words like hada. Hada is considered mubham, whereas mudmar is different. So a pronoun is specific, but its specificity is dependent upon you pointing at something. Okay, so when you say this car, but there's no car, and I don't know which you're pointing at, and I don't know what it is. So it is definite, but it needs an ishara. You need to actually refer to something, otherwise nobody knows what you're talking about. With the pronoun, you need so the mubham needs ishara, with the what's it called? The pronoun, you need an a'id. You need to go back to something, right? So if you don't have a word that's referring to, like he said, I am sick, but you don't know who he is, then you don't know what I means, right? When I said you, but you don't know which you I'm referring to, then you don't know what it means. So that's a kind of a difference there. So and he says the word kul, right? So the question is, could a word that is mubham, could a could a what's it called? Um, could a demonstrative pronoun like this and that, could that be mudaf? Like in English, can I say the this of that? Does that make any sense? The this of that? Like can you do idafa of a demonstrative pronoun? I don't think so, right? And in fact, in Arabic, does that exist, right? So, but what's similar to iyaka is dhaka, right? So dhaka is similar to iyaka, and it's similar to ara'aytaka, right? So when you think about these three sentences, three words, dha plus dhaka. So it's not saying the thing of you. The kaf is there to indicate distance. It's not there to indicate what it is. And it does not give, it's not idafa, right? There is not mudaf to the kaf. The kaf also changes depending on who I'm talking to. So I say dhaka, dhaki, right? Or dhalika and dhaliki. So it's right. So it's kind of like a pronoun in that it kind of has a meaning, but it's not really a pronoun in that it's not mudaf, right? That's not idafa when you say dhaka or dhalika. Similarly, ara'aytaka, right? Ara'ayta, have you considered? Ara'aytaka, have you considered? It's just thrown in as something extra, right? So what they're going to do then is they're going to weigh iyaka against dhaka and against ara'aytaka, okay? And we're going to say, what is the kaf? Is it a noun? Say no, it's not a noun. Okay, does it mean something? Say yeah, it means something. It's kind of like ara'aytaka, ara'aytaki, right? Dhaka, dhaki, iyaka, iyaki. So it means something, but it is analogous to the harf that is added at the end of these words. Okay, so now so what they're going to say then is to say iya is the pronoun and the kaf is a harf. So it's not idafa. Okay, it's not idafa because you can't do idafa of iya to something, and you can't just like and so it's like the kaf in dhaka and the kaf in ara'aytaka and so it's the same kind of thing. So iya is the damir and the kaf harf khitab or something like that. Can't remember what term they use, but like harf khitab, right? But it's a harf. And لا محل له من إعراب and it's not إضافة. It's not في محل جر. Does that make sense? Everyone's following?
Yes.
Okay. And this is نعبد فعل مستقبل. What does that mean? What does he mean? What's this term? فعل مستقبل.
That it's a future tense.
Mm-hmm. What does that? What term does that is equivalent to the terminology that we would use?
مضارع.
مضارع, right? When he says فعل مستقبل, he means مضارع. And that's interesting. So why doesn't he say present tense then? So مضارع doesn't mean present tense. And مستقبل doesn't mean present tense either. So the people who use the word مضارع, they call it the resembling verb. So they're not even talking about time to begin with. And those who say mustaqbal, they're saying the future, and they're not saying present tense. So does na'budu mean I am worshipping, or in the future, or I will worship? Or does it mean I am worshipping? What does it mean both?
إذا يفيد التجدد يا شيخ.
It does feed tajaddud, right? Right. And tajaddud يتطلب زمن, right? So tajaddud is happening, and so that space of time between zero, where we are at t equals zero, right where we are now, plus something has to be something. So arguably, there is no present in order for tajaddud to happen in. So it has to always be future, right? And from a philosophical point of view, is there a present? Does the present even exist? Like I go and ask a theoretical physicist, and I say, "Tell me what now is." Do you think they're gonna have a problem defining now? So if I make now very vague, like, oh, it's the 29th of November, that's quite easy. But that's not now, is it? It is not that's not the now. So the 29th of November is either part of the past or part of the future. Is there a now? Right? So this is what I'm saying is you cannot separate language from philosophy. And the fact that you see this term, that you could imagine that that's what they're thinking about. These people are not fools. They're thinking about time and space and this and that, right? And so like there's no such thing as a now. There's only future and past. The now is so infinitesimally small that it doesn't exist. It is one over infinity, which is zero, right? One over infinity is zero. So there's no present and past, right? There's no present. There's only past and future. والله أعلم. فعل مستقبل وهو مرفوع عند الخليل وعند سيبويه لمضارعته الأسماء. So why is it مرفوع? So Sibawayh and Khalil, they say, because it resembles nouns. In that it has lots of ma'ani, right? Li tajlis, that's a command. Lam tajlis, you didn't sit. Uridu an tajlis, I want you to sit, etc. Okay, so it has lots of different meanings, just like the different roles that a noun could have. The mudari has lots of different meanings and different roles, so it resembles the noun. Similarly, has the same structure, right? Yuslim, Muslim, right? يفعل فاعل. يفعل فاعل has the same harakat and sakanat. So it looks similar. Same kind of structure as the verb, as the noun, same kind of meaning as the noun. So the same kind of function as the noun. Right? That's why it's called مضارعة. وقال الكسائي الفعل المستقبل مرفوع بالزوائد التي في أوله. So again, he's trying to say لفظي. I need نعامل لفظي. So the noon, the ta, the ya, the hamza at the beginning of the fi'l mudari', that's what makes it مرفوع. Right? So notice you take away that cause, and you get the fi'l madi, and this it's mabni. You put it in, you have a hamza, you have a ya, you have a noon, you have a ta, that does a rafa' of the verb. So that must be the cause then. Right? So these zawa'id, these things at the beginning, they must be the amil lafzi. Right? وقال الفراء وهو, which is problematic. Why is that problematic? Why is it problematic to say that the fi'l mudari' is marfu' because of the letters in the beginning of it?
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
So he's saying Kisa'i is saying the reason why yajlisu has a dhamma, whereas kataba is mabni, is that kataba does not have a noon or a ya or a ta at the beginning of it, whereas yaktubu has a ya, and that ya is making the verb have the dhamma. That's the logic he's using. What's problematic with that?
It's problematic because even with those same zawa, it could be mansub in another instance of
Okay,
zoom.
that's number one, and number two is are those the word, are they part of the verb?
Yes.
Good. So
Yeah.
so that's saying that you cause yourself. So the fire is on fire because it's on fire. That doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like a kid who says, the kid is trying to explain why the balloon is floating into the air. Here's a balloon that is full of helium. So he says, why did the balloon go up in the air? He says, because it's full of helium. Well, that's not really the reason, is it? It's something else that's actually pushing that thing up, right? A thing can't cause itself, right? So that's a problem, right? So if you have to imagine the world that these people are in, if you went to Baghdad at that time or Kufa, all of these discussions, it's going to be you know, and these are just the big names. Around each of these big names, there's 1,000 other philosophers, linguists, jurists, mutakallimin talking. All of these things. It's a hugely, extremely vibrant community of really deep thinkers, right? And we just see certain names that survived, right? There's a lot happening. وقال الفراء هو مرفوع بسلامته من الجوازم والنواصب, right? Which is a kind of lame argument as well, right? So it's like why did the apple fall? Because nothing pushed it up. That's not really right. And it's similar to say okay, or even so that's not really a reason. So interestingly, we use faraz. That's the i'rab that we'll do today. We'll say لتجرده من الناصب والجازم. That's what we'll use today. Right? We're following Farra. Farra is Kufa, not Basran. Usually we are like 80% Basran, right? The Basran kind of thing took over. That's the answer that we give. It's not a very good answer, right? But that's the answer we give. So it says إياك منصوب, i.e. في محل نصب, not منصوب. منصوب means it has إعراب. There's no إعراب here. في محل نصب بنستعين عطف جملة على جملة. Okay. So إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. What happens when you do atf of a sentence to a sentence? Nothing. Nothing happens. That's what he's just saying, right? Rhetorically, there is a difference though, right? So I exercise sometimes and I don't exercise other times, right? As opposed to I exercise sometimes, I don't exercise sometimes. That doesn't make any sense. So wows are very important in the structure of language in English and in Arabic. Very important. I'm Swiss and I'm Muslim, i.e., that means the relationship between there is an assumed contradiction, but there's not actually a contradiction. There's an assumed contradiction, but I'm saying even though, that's what I'm trying to say, right? I don't like nasi lemak. It's too fatty, right? Does everybody know what nasi lemak is?
Yeah,
Yeah, Zafar, you do? You've been to
yeah.
Malaysia?
I got to, yeah, in
There
Singapore.
we go. There we go. Okay, so notice when I don't put the word and, I'm explaining why. It's like a colon. I don't like Oldham. It's too grey, right? I don't like Oldham and it's too grey. That means they're two separate points, right? I like Oldham. Mancurians are what's it called? Are friendly people, right? I like Oldham, and Mancurians are friendly people, right? There's so one was a reason for an explanation, and the other one was a separate point. So wow and no wow is very, very important in balagha, right? And it can be relevant in nahu, but not super important here. He says, وقرأ يحيى بن ثابت يحيى بن وثاب والأعمش نستعين نستعين بكسر النون وهذه لغة تميم وأسد. I think this is Asad. It doesn't have to be Asad. It can be Est. So there's three tribes. Est, Asad, and Azd. So-and-so al-Asti, so-and-so al-Asadi, and so-and-so al-Azdi. Right? It's not the same tribe. وهذه لغة تميم وأسد وقيس وربيعة. Right? And this is what you find in the Levant, for example. They say yijlis. What they'll do is they take the haraka of the middle of the letter and they put it in the beginning. Right? يضرب. So they say ضرب يضرب. So they say يضرب. كتب يكتب يكتب. Right? يكتب. And so this is not you know. So he says وفعل ذلك يدل على أنه من يدل على أنه من استعون نستعين نستغفر. Not quite sure the نستغفر. I'm not quite sure what this word is here. Oh, yeah. استغفر I don't know why there's a kasra here. استعون yes. من استعون. I'm not sure what the kasra is doing here. من استعون. And I don't know what's that. How is that related? I'm not sure. Anyway, there's a kasra nasta'in. So the kasra makes you say nasta'in. Wallahu alam. So here, if I don't understand what's going on here, and you talk about qira'at shadha, very easy. I'm going to go to another book on qira'at shadha, right? Like Ibn Khalaway's book on qira'at shadha, like Abu Ali al-Farisi's book, like there's various books on qira'at shadha and the ta'wil of them, what's happening, right? But the point is, it's valid Arabic to say nista'in, okay? So why can't I do that in the Quran, right? Because that's not one of the qira'at, right? Nista'in. But it is qira'at of A'mash, right? And people have ijazat in qira'at of A'mash. It does exist today, right? People, it is quite like A'mash is almost widespread enough to become like one of the 10, to become the 11, right? It is quite famous, but it's not, right? So you have to understand that it's not the cutoff point between the 10 qira'at and some other of the other qira'at is not, okay, some of them is like random, like what is it, like, you know, Malaka Yawmiddin, right? But some of them is like, that's not super random. So notice here, this is a fairly, you know, the dialect of Tamim. We see that in the Quran all the time. So it's not, and Rabi'a, these are not small groups of people, fairly, you know, so it's kind of like it is a thing that exists in Arabia. So it's not like a crazy lugha, but it just doesn't come in the qira'at. Wallahu a'lam. At least the 10 qira'at. والأصل في نستعين نستعون قلبت حركة الواو على الياء أي نقلت. That's what it means. Right? When he says قلبت حركة الواو, it means نقلت. So we're going to have these two terms, naql and qalb. He's using them the same. Right? But they're not the same. In sarf, we're going to use the word qalb and naql. Right? فلما انكسر ما قبل الواو صارت ياء والمصدر استعانة والأصل استعوان. Right? Like استغفار. قلبت حركة الواو على العين. Right? So we put the haraka nuqilat. The haraka of the waw shifted to the ain. So then it became استيعاون استيعاون فلما انفتح ما قبل الواو صار ألفا استعان ولا يلتقي ساكنان the two ألفs فحذفت الألف الثانية right لأنها زائدة وقيل الأولى لأن الثانية لمعنى ولزمت الهاء عوضا and there was this عوض this replacement happened استعانة right and so a lot of these things are descriptions and not reasons okay A and then B does it matter if they're wrong like if all the ulama of the Muslims said that this is what happened to the word isti'ana is that a dalil? So I read in like 20 different books written by different shuyukh, huge shuyukh, Sibawayh, Khalil, Ibn Hisham, and they all say this is what happened. This is how isti'wan became isti'ana. Does it have to be true?
No.
Why doesn't it have to be true? Sorry, ijma', right? Is that not ijma'? And subhanAllah, even the Nahwiyin, they'll use ijma'. They'll say, oh, ijma', what's the reason for this? Ijma'. They'll use these things. Go ahead, Joe. So does ijma' mean anything on a mas'ala dunyawiyya?
Isn't it the case that like the origin of words and the language is like so old that even if this is the best guess, it's still a guess?
It's true, but it doesn't have to be true. So the issue is if the ulama agreed on a religious matter that is religiously binding, it is true, and there's no way to debate it. But if it's not a religious matter, like this, right? Here we're talking about language. You know, we're not talking about religion. We're talking about linguistics. We're talking about phonology. We're talking about right grammatical analysis. So when you come along and say no, the verse means this and doesn't mean this, oh, that's a religious matter. But here I'm saying, how did it change? So you go and study linguistics, comparative linguistics, or comparative Semitic linguistics, or comparative whatever Middle East linguistics at University of whatever, and they're like, no, that's not how it worked. And you actually do like, and you use AI, for example, to model the mouth and do this and do that and say how did it change and why would it change and this, and you compare it to 50 other different changes in different other languages, and you say that's not even true. It's fine. Right? That's totally fine. So, for example, I don't know much about linguistics, but they'll look at it in a totally different way. They say that basically, like, you know, ista'wana, the wow is a semi-vowel, so it assimilates with the fatha. So instead of saying isti'wan, right? Uh, istighfar, isti'wan, it's going to assimilate with the ain, and it's going to become ista'a, isti'an, and then the rhythm. There's a tune, the words. You don't say isti'an, you say isti'ana. So the term marbuta is nothing to do with iwad. It's to do with a rhythm of words in Arabic. There's a totally different way of looking at things. So qala, did it change? How did it change? Oh, this was voweled and this. It's like, no, they're looking at it a totally different way. Is that okay? It's fine. The problem is in arrogance. This is what the problem is. When you say, see, we didn't know anything, right? That's problematic, right? Arrogance is not acceptable, and disdain, right? and ignoring things because they're Eastern, right? That's not healthy at all, right? But it's totally fine, right? And a non, or like Jalaluddin Suyuti says something historically this happened, and you're like, well, actually, that's very, very unlikely, given modern is historical research based on what was probably happening in the economy at the time. He says this happened for this reason. It's like actually probably that's a very minor cause. It's more likely this. It's not a problem, right? That's not a religious issue. Like Jalaluddin Suyuti is not right because he's Jalaluddin Suyuti, you know? And he says something about history, he says something about grammar. Like it doesn't have to be right. So it's important to understand, in the other class talking about the limitations of um, certain information and how to use it and how useful something is. Right? To understand where does the buck stop? It's like this not necessarily true. This doesn't have to be true, right? Okay. So as one of my friends phrased it, he said the nice thing about Arabic grammar is you can be Salafi, like you can be, it's not a problem. It's fine. Like I have my own way of looking at things. It's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Right? As long as you're not arrogant. Okay. اهدنا دعاء وطلب في موضع جزم عند الفراء ووقف عند البصريين. So what's Farra's position? What is the Basriyin position?
What does waqf mean here?
Exactly. That's what I'm asking. So Farra is saying that it's jazm, and the Basriyin are saying that it is waqf. So what's Farra's position? What's he saying?
Farra is saying that it's a dua and that's why it's majzoom.
Majzoom. So he's saying Farra, like other Kufiyun, are saying ihdi is a short way of saying litahdi, right? Ijlis, litajlis. It's the same thing. So for the Kufiyun, there's no such thing as fi'al amr. It's not a thing. Fi'al amr is just a kind of a shortened version of the jazm. So the word is majzoom. Okay? The word is majzoom. Okay? Now the Basriyin are calling it waqf. So if we're not say if so they don't say that they say that it's a fi'l amr, and fi'l amr is a category of verb. It is not a subcategory of the fi'l mudari' majzoom. So therefore, what do they mean by it when he says waqf? What does a fi'l amr? What does a fi'l amr look like? What's the what would you say if it said uktub fi'lu amrin something something something? What's the i'rab of it?
فعل أمر.
Mhm.
Sorry, is this according to the Basriyin or
The
the
bus. How would you do the i'rab of it? فعل amrin something. What's going to come next?
موقوف
We wouldn't say
in
موقوف. We
this
would
case?
say مبني على كذا كذا, right? That's how we would analyze
Oh,
it. For we would
مبني على الكسر.
exactly. So what does waqf mean? It means مبني.
Okay.
وهو مبني عند البصريين. It's موقوف. It's waqf. It's stop. Like it's the same thing. Like it's so مبني means built in a particular way so that such doesn't change. That's what it means. So waqf. That's what they mean, right? So it's مبني. That's what he means by it. مبني عند البصريين أي وقف عند البصريين ولذلك حذفت الياء والألف والألف ألف وصل لأن أول المستقبل مفتوح تهدي وكسرتها لأنه من يهدي so it has to follow the yeah يهدي والنون والألف مفعول أول مفعول أول right so there's two guide us right والصراط مفعول ثان وجمعه في القليل أسرطة like أفعلة أفئدة فؤاد أفئدة صراط أسرطة وفي الكثير سرط like what else وصنفات فعال فعل um, كتاب what's the plural of كتاب
كتب.
كتب صراط سرط وقال الأخفش أهل الحجاز يؤنثون الصراط right? They make it feminine so they say هذه صراط like هذه طريق هذه سبيلي so سبيل is feminine طريق is feminine صراط is feminine أهل الحجاز يؤنثون الصراط right so you have to understand in Arabic there are obviously there are certain words that are just randomly feminine okay right and so many of these will be treated in different ways like do you say هذا طريق or هذه طريق do you say هذا حال جيد or هذه حال جيدة right the word حال you can treat in either way طريق you can treat in either way سوق right so سوق in the past used to be more feminine سوق right is a feminine but today we say سوق مفتوح open سوق سوق is masculine most of the time right and then so there's many words that are kind of somewhere in between you can treat it in different ways okay وقرأ ابن عباس الصراط بالسين وبعض قيس يقولون بين الصاد والزاي ولا يجوز أن يجعل زايا إلا أن تكون ساكنة قال قطرب إذا كان بعد السين في نفس الكلمة طاء أو قاف أو خاء أو غين فلك أن تقلبها صادا okay so here with the word sirat the word is originally sirat with a sin that is the word from sarata which means to swallow something up it's like the road is swallowing you up sarata with a sin so what's happened then is the ta at the end of the word is affecting the sin and it can affect it in two ways so the ta is has two sifas okay the ta has two sifas the ta has a sifa of jahr voiced and it also has a sifa of being tabaqiyya I don't know how to say that in English what tabaqiyya is so it's of the huruf al-isti'la okay so what happens then is we get the sifa of isti'la and we give it to the sin and it becomes a sad so sirat okay the ta affects the sin and it changes the sin to a sad so we get sirat but the ta is also voiced right it's a voiced so we can also get that voiced the jahr of the ta and put it to the sin and a sin that is majhura that has jahr is called what in English or in Arabic what is it's ChatGPT what is a voiced S what is a voiced S like what happens to when you get a scene which is unvoiced it is mahmus it is unvoiced in tajweed so mahmus is under the hams and then we're going to make it give it jahr I want to get this an
ChatGPT
S
says ChatGPT says that a voiced S is a Z.
Thank you very much. So ChatGPT is explaining the text to us. So what's happening is I'm taking the jahr, the voiced attribute of the ta, giving it to the sin, and it becomes a zay, right? But it's not just any zay. It says وبعض قيس يقولها بين الصاد والزاي. So it is not a sad, and nor is it a zay, but it is a sin that has become voiced, so it became a z, a z, and then it also became tabaqi because of the ta. So it is a sad that is voiced. So it is z, not z, z, not, right? So you can't say ihna zirat. It's not zirat, right? It is ihdina zirat. A voiced tabaqi scene, right? So this tells us a number of things. That number one, a lot of letters have just different faces. So in English, right, you're teaching English in Singapore or Malaysia, and you're telling the kids, right, Muhammad Arif, you teach English at all? Not sure he's here. Anyway, the Zafar is teaching English in Thailand, and he's saying dogs and cats. And they say, yeah, Mr. Zafar, can you please explain to me when do we say dogs and when do you say cats? Say, aha. You have to look at the letter that comes before the S. If the letter that comes before the S is voiced, you pronounce the S as a Z, as a Z. If the letter that comes before the S is not voiced, is unvoiced, you pronounce it as an S. Okay. They're like, why do you write it like why don't you write it as a Z when it's a Z and an S when it's an S? Oh, that's how we do it, right? So the native speaker does that all the time. They don't have to think about it. We just change it from hams to jahar all the time. Just shift all the time. Whereas somebody who's not a native speaker will be confused, right? And have to learn it as a rule. Okay, so this tells us that letters, right? That when we're studying tajweed, we're kind of studying linguistics or studying phonetics or phonology, right? Basically, this is a half of tajweed is something a shared science throughout the whole world. It's not something unique at all, and that letters have different sides. So the sin has a face of a sad, has a face of a zay, and has a face of a zai. The same letter basically. It's like one letter that has four different faces, depending on which variables you put on it. Okay. And I'm sure there's other variables in other languages that you can add, you know. Okay, and then how do you know if something's voiced or unvoiced, or if it's majhul, jahar or hams? You put your hands on your ears, and you go through the letter A, B, 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 B. So you hear it with the B, right? Put your hands on your ears. B, 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 K, 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 G. So a K and a G, they're the same letter. K and G, they're the same letter. But one is voiced, one's unvoiced. Okay, G, 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 G. A P and a B, they're the same letter. One's voiced and one's unvoiced. That's why we write them the same way in English, just with the P and the B look almost the same. So b ab up. It's this, they're the same letter, right? They're the same letter, just voiced and unvoiced. T and a D. What else? Th and the. They're the same thing. That's why in English we write it as th, right? With is pronounced as a the, right? But with, but then becomes I don't know, three. You don't say three, right? So this is the same letter, but so it's the same sound, but do you want to make it voiced or do you make it unvoiced? And things can change in tajweed and things can change in English, right? I have to. Do I have to? The V is becoming an F because a V and an F are the same letter. It's just shifting from voiced to unvoiced. Do I have to, right? but you mean do I have to, right? 50, right? Why do Americans say 50, right? 50. And I don't know how you pronounce it, but so 50 or 50, right? Uh, so 50 would make sense because the F is unvoiced and the T is also unvoiced, right? But it's also awkward to have two letters that are next to each other that are both the same. So you change it 50, 50, right? Just like we do with the word um, uh, loaves. So you could say loafs, loafs, and the F is unvoiced and the S is unvoiced, but it's a bit awkward. So you say loafs, loafs, right? And then you say that I don't want to say loafs, so I shift it to loaves. So I changed the F into a voiced F, which is a V, and I changed the S into a voiced S, which is a Z or a Z. Does that make sense? So that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, and so we have the same thing like busaq. You're gonna see in the hadith, buzaq, busaq, busaq, and they're like, what's going on? Like, what? How do you say spit? Is it with a sod, or is it with a sin, or is it with a zay? It's like, kind of. It's like this is what's happening. Do you want the calf to affect the sin? And also the ba is also voiced. So should you say busaq, or should you say buzaq, or should you say busaq? And they write it with a zay, and it probably isn't actually a zay. It's probably buzaq, buzaq, a sin majhura tabaqiyya, like just like here, zzz, right? And this also tells us that there are sounds in Arabic that are not written, just like imala. So here's a harf that we don't write. There's no letter. There's no letter for zzz, right? But it does exist. Saqar, right? Somebody was asked about the word saqar. Is it saqar with a sin or saqar with a sad? He says, I say zaqar with a, the same thing. The same discussion. خير. So he says, مقول بين الصاد والزاي ولا يجوز أن يجعل زايا إلا أن تكون ساكنة. Right? You can't say صراط. So he's saying you can't say, so for the qira'ah زراط, it would be like this. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين, not صراط. You have to, it's only if it's silent. وقال قطرب, the student of Sibawayh, إذا كان بعد السين في نفس الكلمة طاء أو قاف أو خاء أو غين فلك أن تقلبها صادا. So it's becoming a heavy version of itself, right? And these are all قاف طاء خاء غين. Yeah, these are all also voiced. they're all مجهورة. مستقيم نعت للصراط. Okay. Makes sense, inshallah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, useful point of information, just a side point of information. I was, you can kind of tell I'm really into languages. And so in my undergrad, I wanted to do Arabic, Persian, and linguistics. So somebody told me, they said, Fareed, don't do linguistics. It's a waste of time. And it is a waste of time. So I have enough knowledge of linguistics, right, from teaching English and from tajweed. And I'm not even a tajweed teacher. And I'm not really a professional English teacher. Like you can get enough knowledge to crack this and then move on. So there's a lot of things in life where you don't need to be specialized in to get by. Hadith, right? We just had hadith class for those who hadith. I'm not a specialist in hadith, but I know enough to get by, you know? So there's lots of things where you have to look at and say, well, that's really important. But it's like, do I have to read Kitab? Like I have Kitab Sibawayh and there's a bunch of hawashi on it. Like, but you know, life is quite short in reality. So you can get by with enough. Like, do I have to read political science to become a mufti? It's like, I mean, you can just read a bit about political science, right? and just be kind of familiar with it. You can know enough about geology, know enough about, I don't know, the world. There's lots of sciences where you can just be somewhat familiar with them, and that's enough. But if you got into every single thing, you would just waste your whole life. So may Allah reward that sheikh. He said don't get into linguistics. It's a waste of time. I did some linguistics. I did one class in linguistics at University of Jordan. It was a total waste of time, right? So like I really don't advise people doing things like that. There's lots of things where be like, that's really cool, but don't do it. You know, like you can be aware of things without being mastering things, and as long as you know enough to get by, you'll be fine. And another one of my teachers, he said, it says, "And ta'rif shay and kulli shay." You should know something about everything, but you don't have to specialize in everything. Otherwise, just you'll waste your life, right? And ta'rif shay and kulli shay, well, kulli shay and shay, but you do have to know everything about one thing. There has to be a certain thing in your life, like I actually know everything about this. Like I'm a specialist in this. When it comes to this, no, I'm a specialist. So that is actually important, right? So you say like Shafi fiqh, oh yeah, I know everything about that. Hanafi fiqh, I know everything about that. Hadith, that's my thing, you know. But it's very important that life is short, and you just have to kind of just pick like, oh, this is important, this is important. Thank you very much. Move on. I know enough about tajweed, to teach ulum al-Quran. I'm not a tajweed teacher. You know, I know enough about um, history, Islamic history, to be able to navigate. But I haven't studied Islamic history. I didn't like do that. I was like, oh, I have to do a master's in Islamic history. Like you don't. Like many people, they caught in this trap, and life is very short. So you have to prioritize things. Be aware of lots of things, but you don't need to know everything. So if you do a mutton in every science, and just be aware of life, inshallah, you'll be okay. You don't need to specialize in every single thing possible and impossible, right? Because you won't be able to. Okay, inshallah. Any questions or queries?
No, sure.
Inshallah.
No, sir.
Okay, خير إن شاء الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم جزاكم خير